So in this segment, we're going to be talking about how do you convince a leaver Brexit was a bad idea, make them stand in a queue. It's quite an interesting article from Zoe Williams in The Guardian. She makes a lot of points, but the key point is, what good is your sovereignty when you're stuck in a queue for 3+ hours at an airport because you can't go through the electronic gates because of Brexit? So she says, I hate the phrase the architects of Brexit, partly because I still long for an alternate world in which Brexit vanishes as a word and a concept. Saying it has architects credits it with a degree of structural soundness it does not possess, which is true. Brexit has no structural stability whatsoever because the people who proposed it originally, it didn't pan out like that. We left the single market, which we were told only a madman would leave the single market. I guess we are a country of mad people. It's not very promising. So I get her point. Nevertheless, there is a man, Daniel Hannan, writing in The Telegraph. He casually dropped in that it would have been easier for us all to have stayed in the single market and then have a transition phase out. That's what he argued. And yet this man can argue that. Tell you what, that would have been helpful between 2016 and 2019, which is true, during the Theresa May period where that kind of thing could have happened. I didn't see Daniel Hannan speaking about it that much. This is just the zealots. This is the way the zealots are. It is pointless to try and hold them to account or pose any questions about their sheer brass neck. They will chase you off a cliff and then ask you why you didn't think to pack a parachute, which is a bit hyperbole. But point being is that they're the ones who caused this, and they're the ones now saying, "Oh, it's not our fault. I wanted it this way or that way." Stupid. Hannan is allowed to say this since from him it is original. He was saying back in 2016 to stay in the single market during the May period. I don't know really what he argued, but yeah, he's just a dodo, isn't he? When a leaver gets stuck in an airport queue in Malaga for 3 hours, it's not just leavers though, it's Remainers as well. While their EU counterparts glide through and swipe all the best hire cars, they are allowed to curse the forces of bureaucracy. But this is the nature of being a third country. That's the top and bottom of it. But if a Remainer did it would be called Ramoning again, which is true. This is sovereignty. 3 hours at an airport is sovereignty. Ryanair's Michael O'Leary, Jet2 Steve Heapy blamed chaotic scenes at airports and stranded passengers on the combined forces of Brexit. The odd Tory schmuck will go through a rote denial, but their heart really isn't in it. And that's evident because, you've even got Grant Shapps saying, I voted to remain. They are kind of slowly backing away from it. At least some of them are, because they realise how bad things are now. Without freedom of movement, airports are struggling with staff. When you go abroad, certain airports are struggling with staff, depending on which ones you look at. But when you look at a country like Spain, where the non-EU queue is doing really badly and the EU queue is not doing that badly, you got to figure out what's the answer there. Perhaps we should go back to the drawing board, start with a little like customs union. That isn't so hard, is it? But the problem with a customs union is it would probably eradicate some of the trade deals that we've done with Australia and New Zealand, for example. So I don't think a customs union would be viable, a light one anyways. Brexit overlords will turn around all innocent and say, isn't this what you wanted? Politicians who can admit they made a mistake, and there's such a thing as admitting to have made a mistake, but when you take so long to do it, it's kind of pointless. Once you get to the end of Brexit, which we're not that far away from, there's still more to do. There's mutual recognition of standards that, that's temporary. Still some financial services exist within the UK. At that point, once everything's kind of done, we've got full separation in a sense from the EU, would they turn around and say, oh, we made a mistake? At that point, do you give them any redemption? It's taken so long. At least I give some credit to that guy, Ian Perkis, or whatever his name is, Perkis, the fishing guy, because once he realised how bad the red tape is, he was like, I made a mistake. But with these ministers, they won't admit it until they're out of government. Not really. It's always going to be foreign holidays where the sharp point of reality is, which is true, something I didn't think of, because I didn't really go on holiday, that people realise what they've lost when they see the smaller EU queues. The nightmare for EU citizens trying to figure out how to stay in the UK and whether to even bother, that's a private matter. She's talking about residency. I can't remember the exact term we had in Britain, but essentially that's what she's talking about. That plays out in individual households. That's an individual issue if you have the rights to stay in the country. Staff shortages, supply chain problems, even tailbacks at ports can be filed under other people's problems, at least for a while. Some of that I disagree with, like restaurants and other places, people complain a lot. And also obviously the lack of food and things like that. I don't think you can really, I don't think people see them as other people's problems. Airports, though, families in Gatwick having their having longed for a trip to Corfu cancelled with 15 minutes notice, talking through their disappointment on radio phone-ins. That's one where, it'd be quite difficult. The government are going to have to explain why this is the way it is. Are moments that are just too readily dramatised. No amount of rhetoric can erase them, and sooner or later there will be a reverse ferreting all over the place. So, and people's flights have been cancelled. You can get a refund, but you're gonna have to get a refund on the hotel or the place you're staying at, which is quite difficult. All the currency you exchanged, again, what do you do with that? Do you keep it as is? Do you transfer it back at a loss? It's pretty difficult. Like your flight being cancelled leads to a massive domino effect. And we're seeing a lot of that in the UK, where a lot of flights are being cancelled because we don't have the staff here. So even if you can get a flight, you're stuck in a foreign airport for many hours on end. I remember last year a guy complained this isn't the Brexit he voted for when he was stuck in an airport queue. It's just wild. I think that might have been 2 years ago, actually. Looking back, I wish we had fought the entire EU referendum on the hassle of it. A bit less Project Fear and a bit more Project Ball Ache. The problem was, at the time, they weren't arguing an end to freedom of movement. They were arguing for an end of kind of EU, kind of foreign people to have no freedom of movement. But of course we would keep it. Why would the EU get rid of our freedom of movement? Don't they like tourists? Don't they want Brits to work in their countries, to enrich their countries? That's what they argued. The argument that we would stay in the single market means inherently there has to be freedom of movement. So that argument I don't think would have worked. I get her point though. More admin, more queuing, more gigantic pains in your neck. Is anything worth that? No. What sovereignty really means. It means waiting for things, filling in forms. It means doing everything you least like in life much more often. Waiting, filling out forms, being asked at the airport what are your intentions when you go to the country. Stuff like that. It's a nightmare. Oh well, we'll know better for next time. I don't think there will be a next time. I don't know when we're going to ever go back into. I don't think. I've explained it before in a long form video. Rejoining kind of the EU single market is going to be very, very difficult for us to do because of the way it's set up. After membership would have to be on the table, which again is a nightmare in itself. But yeah, we're seeing massive staff shortages in the UK due to the end of freedom of movement. And once you get to Spain or whichever country it is, apart from Portugal, which allow us to use the e-gates, the other countries don't, and it's up to them. But that's one of the things causing the massive queues. And I think British people are going to learn firsthand how important freedom of movement is. Because at the end of the day, Britain is cold. It's a cold country. Going abroad is good for people in a sense. The warm weather, the difference in climate, of food, everything else, it's great. But sitting in an airport for 3+ hours with a load of kids, that doesn't sound like very much fun, does it? Anyways, I'm going to leave it there. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Like, comment, share, subscribe. Support the channel on Patreon if you can. Hopefully I'll see you in the next one.